Hey everybody, this is AI with Dr. Craig Hansen. I'm delighted to have Amanda Fetch with us, coming all the way from the USA, who was recently hired with US Central Command. Congratulations on that appointment.
Thank you.
And you're about to complete your PhD.
Yep. Pretty soon, January of 25, I'll be all finished.
Wow, that's not a small thing. What's your topic?
Yeah, so my topic is actually going to be in technology and AI.
Mhm.
And the focus is actually pretty interesting because I don't have a deep background in space, but I'm doing space situational awareness and orbital debris mitigation. So pretty much the space junk problem. And so how I'm kind of honing that into the data science, AI, and analytics world is looking at all of the data out there. So before I take sort of like a deep dive into this thing, very high level is there's a lot of space junk out there that could be the size of like a grain of sand that can
Mm.
cause some major damage. And we don't track that stuff. So it's how do we figure out, how we can mitigate and do something about this space junk floating around that's very dangerous when we don't even track these like tiny particles. So I'm trying to figure out a data analysis framework on how we can start analyzing something or making sense out of data that could be missing. I mean, it's your typical when you dig into data science, like outliers, missing data, and things like that. So should be very exciting. So you'll have to look for it when it comes out.
Absolutely will. How about you tell us your origin story, your background?
Yeah. So for me, and I'm kind of working backwards because now I'm going through this PhD now, about to finish. But I've been in data science, analytics, AI, machine learning, that whole space for a little over 20 years now. And so I've worked with everything from larger companies to smaller startups looking to scale. And I've been in various industries like biotech, entertainment, and retail. And I've also done a ton of work within the educational space, even though I'm not a professor or anything like that. But I've dabbled in some work as a subject matter expert for like digital transformation and AI, a little bit of AI in marketing, which is constantly evolving world. So I work with a couple different educational institutions as well, and I'm a lifelong learner, so constantly kind of working through that. But yeah, just very high level. I kind of started out in the marketing operations world, and I was sort of thrown into learning SQL and different querying languages. And my background was actually for undergrad was business and marketing.
Mm.
So I had a passion for it, but I wasn't classically trained. So I'm not a comp sci background, but yet I've done all this work in the space, which is
Wow.
interesting. So now I'm kind of more classically trained. But anyway, I started out in the marketing ops world. And then I got more into a strict analytics background where I worked as a director of analytics for some companies, a few marketing agencies, and different companies that work with clients in the biotech space. So it's been a pretty interesting evolution of my background and how I got where I am really right now.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the new role. And what's that all about? What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I'm working on now. So one of the things basically is you mentioned the CENTCOM. So that's actually part of my PhD work, which is pretty interesting. They're using OpenAI and some different, I guess I would say, generative AI solutions in order to look through intelligence and build some reports and things like that with some automation. So it's
Mm.
pretty interesting because it's in conjunction with some of the stuff I'm doing for the PhD on the side. So that's pretty awesome. A couple other things. I actually just finished doing some work as a brand ambassador for a company, Narratize. And so they're working with Gen AI as well on what they call narrative science. And so they're basically able to make anything from, let's say it's a marketing pitch or something like that with content for a company to building a white paper with their narrative science technology, which is pretty cool. Another company I'm working with now, I'm advising with Data Squared. And so they're actually working with clients in the oil and gas and government. So that's pretty interesting because they're using LLMs again, generative AI, but also knowledge graph based solutions. So this whole sort of world of, I guess, graph neural networks and things like that has really been taking off hand in hand, I'd say, with the generative AI space. So pretty interesting stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world of AI today.
I don't think there's a way to escape our digital footprint these days. And I guess that's part of your role as your new role is pulling in social media, pulling in how things are connected with through the internet, using AI to make decisions or pull in data so senior leaders can decide if people are safe, if they're going to be safe, who might be unsafe. Would that be a summary?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. So, for example, some of the solutions in the government space, and again, with like CENTCOM, for example, different solutions with the intelligence community. So, being
Mm,
able to, going back to a little of the work at Data Squared, being able to say, okay, we have this certain target or something we want to hone in on. And in those sort of, I guess, industries, right, you cannot make a mistake.
mm,
So, if you have a target or something you're sort of going after, you need to know, okay, so, the solution, the LLM, whatever I'm querying against, is telling me to hone in on this specific target. But how sure am I? What is the strength statistically of, this relationship with this target to a certain organization, let's say, or something like that? How do we know that just because, we type in a query and it's based on our data, great, but that this is not hallucinating, right? Or
mm,
telling us false information. And so in things like the government intelligence communities or the medical community, which we're seeing a lot of work being done in AI as well, can't really make a mistake, right?
mm,
You really want to stay away from that. So again, a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of highly sensitive, to your point, information that's being put out there and things like that. But
mm. So when we talk about education and the application of some of these tools, where's the connection between education, classroom teachers, what kids are trying to do with their learning, and what you're doing?
yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that sort of are a bridge between, I guess, education and sort of industry. So one thing I think it's important to highlight and note within the educational space is we're constantly hearing about ethics in AI
Mm,
and bias and things like that. So I think, taking it back to somebody who may be studying AI or different solutions or, again, software development, whatever it might be for different business case solutions and problems, making sure that when you're sort of learning about this, educating students on the ethical concerns and the bias, that's sort of never going away. I'd say hand in hand with that is explainable AI, because I sort of touched on before that there's a lot of development with models. So let's say it's somebody going to school for a comp sci or something like that, developing solutions that there's a lot of packages out there. And I don't want to be too technical here, but like if you're using like a Python and you're using these like scikit-learn and prepackaged, sort of algorithms or, solutions you're using to pretty much build an algorithm for something, right? Some of this code is pre-built. Some of it is, starts to become a black box with how the models are being developed, I guess I would say. And so being able to say, okay, I need to take a step back and be able to educate, let's say the C-suite executives or something like that on exactly what we're developing, because for so long in the data science community, a lot of us were able to get away with these black box solutions. And I think now that's just not okay anymore, because we have this ethics and bias that's really important. And again, we're starting to build solutions, like, for example, in the medical community, where a doctor may be wanting to sort of assess an illness or something like that, and they're using patient notes. And so there might be, on one hand, a little less personalization because we have some of the AI automating, but it's important to note that, again, you have to look back and see, again, how are we sifting through this data? What are we looking at? And things like that, to come back to that explainable piece. Because, even back in the intelligence community, we can't just, make these decisions off a black box algorithm. So I think as far as the educational space and, individuals being training or upcoming within this, they really need to focus on, again, transparency, explainability, ethics, bias. I think that's really, for us, what's really being hard hit right now.
mm. So let's think about a classroom teacher who's teaching maths or science. It may be grade 5 or grade 6. What is the opportunity here for learning?
Oh yeah. So I think even for the younger students, right? So there's actually a lot of younger students who are getting out there and coding, because there was somebody like myself, they love puzzles and numbers. So, there's even like boot camps for somebody in like the lower elementary grades or something like that, where they could even start dabbling a little bit of coding. Um, but I think there's also an opportunity with even solutions like a chat GPT. I mean, we're seeing that in schools and higher learning all over the board pretty much, and the usage of chat GPT. And I actually did a little bit of speaking on this recently on sort of the misconceptions of generative AI. And A lot of what I'm seeing in the educational space, I should say at first, not necessarily currently, was this sort of misconception of using a chat GPT or something, especially for the younger generation, is encouraging them as like a cheating type of thing. It's not augmenting, it is sort of, again, that cheating behavior. But I think there's such an opportunity to get away from that and say, okay, how can we tailor a question for a student and make it more personalized, that they can talk about, let's say, themselves or something that they're familiar with, and use the chat GPT or something like that as a solution for them to, again, augment maybe their personal story or something like that. I think it's going to come back to the personalization for the younger generation rather than saying, okay, write a report on X topic, right? Where they can pull back this information, it's all hallucination because it's
Mm.
not being checked, that kind of thing. So I wouldn't say that's, cheating at all, but that would be, again, you have to watch with these hallucinations in some of these tools. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity to start out the younger generation with these tools early, but again, just with that sort of in the back of their mind that, hey, this is an augmenting type of thing, and not start them out with saying, this is cheating. We, shouldn't do this kind of thing.
So Amanda, if in New Zealand, we have a 9-year-old girl who aspires to do the things that you're doing. What are some courses, some topics, some understandings at that age, 8 or 9 or 10 years old, that they would want to focus on and grow to be able to take forward these steps that you've done?
Yeah. So this might sound very elementary, but I was somebody who loved there was the old game Tetris. So puzzles,
Mm,
any kind of puzzles that could somehow be pulled back to numbers. That's how I got my start. So I think, any child that's very inquisitive or curious, that's the first step, because I think a lot of what we're doing, especially in the data, quote unquote science community, is it's a science. So a lot of what we're doing is a gray area. There's not necessarily that 1 + 1 = 2 mentality that everybody's answer is the same. Even when we're doing business use cases and we're trying to find an algorithm to solve a problem, there's multiple ways you can do it. So it's like just having that curious mindset and willingness to
mm,
learn and explore, I think, is going to be key.
great, great, really good. So if we think about the PhD that you're doing, in 3 or 4 years' time, with what you've learned through your PhD and the results you're producing, where do you hope to make the biggest impact?
Yeah. So for me, I think it probably would come back to data science analysis and things like that, because as I mentioned, there is such a gray area for analysis, how you can do it. I mean, now I believe even in PowerPoint with some of the Copilot and different tools out there, you could pretty much feed a lot of this AI and things some data, and it'll spit you out a PowerPoint, a visualization, a chart, things
Mm,
like that. So there's so many opportunities and possibilities. None of it's wrong. But what I hope to do is maybe rein in some of that and say, hey, there are some basic things that you could focus in on to help you solve pretty much any kind of data science or analytics problem. Especially if you have, I mentioned the orbital debris and the space junk problem, where you have this data that's the size of a grain of sand. And how do you measure that? I mean, there's so many problems out there today that, like, how do we solve this stuff? The data is immeasurable. Where can we even start? But coming back to some sort of basics and a framework that can be used for the bare bones of what would be a good analysis is really where I think I'd like to make an impact.
okay, awesome. And so when you think about that, a piece of sand that's floating around out there in space, and you can create a piece of software or program that's going to identify it and map it, what are the big things, apart from these grain of sand type of things? What are the big things on Earth that your work with AI could impact?
Oh, yeah. So I think just in general, I would say the biggest impact is going to be in the medical community in biotech.
Mm,
Because again, just simply with the vaccines that came out, right, with the
mm,
mRNA technology. And so for me, I'm advising companies that are dabbling in different areas, basically working with unstructured data in some sort of reports. So it could
mm,
also be used within like the patient notes from a physician or something like that,
mm,
is being able to take all of this unstructured data and build insights from it. And then on top of it, again, make sure statistically that those insights that are being derived actually make sense and they're not that hallucination we're seeing if you sort of just use like a chat GPT outside of the box type of solution.
Mm.
So I think that's going to be where there's really going to be able to be an impact made.
Wow, because there is a lot of data out there. When you think
Mhm.
about patients, and it's not being pulled together in a way which really informs the doctors, the families, the patient themselves about what's going wrong and what are the opportunities for greater health. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much that. And there's also, I actually, again, in that talk I did about the misconceptions of AI, Gen AI in particular, there's also an opportunity for the patient to be more informed. So
Mm.
let's say, there's some of the terminologies or things that, a lot of times I do the same thing. When I'm in a doctor's office, they start talking and I'll say, can you repeat that? Can you say, and they might not have all day to do something like that, but I
Mm.
think the AI can help sort of make more digestible maybe a diagnosis or different treatment plans or something like that that can help inform the patient so they also make better decisions about their care as well. So I think it's kind of like a dual thing happening there where the patient and the physician can bridge even a deeper relationship, although some research or AI, I guess misconceptions out there are when the AI comes and there's automation, the patient physician relationship is going to sort of pull apart. But
Mm.
I kind of see it as an opportunity to make that even closer, if that makes sense.
So when I was watching the announcements about 4.0 with OpenAI, and I immediately looked at it and I thought, wow, I was thinking of the barriers to learning that could be removed. And then there was another video on the website about the blind man looking at the king's castle and having a conversation about is the king in residence and what's happening and the ducks are on the pond. And I was thinking about that, about the barriers like vision impairment, not being solved, but being helped by having vision as one of the options in there. When you saw the announcement, did you thought, well, that's just a gimmick, or did you think something deeper?
No, so I think there is just so much opportunity, but I think a lot of that, to
Mm.
your point, that's a great point because I think what we're starting to see now is we have a technology like a chat GPT or a large language model, but there's the ability to bring in like computer vision or something like that and start, I guess, do I want to say merging or morphing some of these different areas of AI together to make even more powerful solutions? So when you're mentioning that, that's kind of what I'm seeing is more of like pulling in a computer vision or something like that, some of these other AI techniques out there. And quite honestly, I can't believe we're as far as we are now. I think a lot of people in the community are kind of shocked because I never thought, AI this quickly would be sort of in the hands of everyone. You don't have to
Mm.
be the computer scientist or have that background. You could literally be anybody. We were talking about elementary school student, right? You can
Mm.
put chat gpt in their hand and they could simply ask it a question and get an answer.
Mm.
I mean, our smartphones, I mean, there's just endless amounts of AI we're using daily without a tech background. So
Mm.
I just find this fascinating. We're living in a really fascinating time.
Yeah, I saw you post on LinkedIn about the generative AI insights, morning news briefings. Is that something that's on every day, and how are you involved?
Yeah, yeah. So that's something on every day. I'd like to be there more than I am now because I have meetings kind of like across the board with this PhD. But yeah, so GIA Insights, it's based out of Boston. And so it's really cool. I work as an AI analyst with them. So what we're doing is working with companies who are looking to implement generative AI solutions and sort of assessing their state and how they could sort of upscale or upgrade their solutions and things like that. But the briefings, which you're mentioning, are really awesome because for the AI business leader, we basically rank articles, whether they're sort of optional, important, or essential. And so
Mm.
we kind of take the time out of there's all of this news, right? Every day, tons of articles. And it's sort of where do you hone in on? And for the
Mm.
leader, they just don't have that time.
Mm.
So we kind of take that off of their plate and say, hey, zero in on this stuff that we really think as, those of us have been working in this area for years, where we think it's going to make the most impact for your business kind of
Mm.
thing. So yeah, so thanks for mentioning it. It's pretty awesome. We've gotten really great feedback about it. So
Yeah, I think I have 6 newsletters, e-newsletters that come in daily or every second day with the latest updates in AI. And often I see similar trends and themes, and I kind of use it as a litmus test of, okay, that's popped up on every single one. So that's obviously something that's important. So I'm using those newsletters as a filter to see what's important, what's recurring, and what's just kind of niche and not really something I'm going to give some time. So I saw that briefing and I thought it would be really good. Amanda, what's the best way for someone to get hold of you after this and engage with you?
Yeah, yeah. So I'd say I'm very active on LinkedIn. I
Hmm.
think many of us are. So I'd say if we're able to provide that,
Mm,
that's pretty much the best way. I check it frequently, and then we could go from there, depending on what sort of discussions or what interests are for everyone out there.
great. I'll make sure your LinkedIn profiles with this video on YouTube and wherever it is. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.